Hello everyone. So something in TF2 that was designed very carefully, I suppose with the exception of Sniper of course, is range and the effective ranges of classes. And range is something you have to take into account for pretty much most of your interactions with different classes. So I wanted to talk about all the different classes, their kind of effective ranges. And of course, really anyone who's played TF2 is going to know at a baseline level, like, yeah, you know, a class like Pyro is generally a short range class. Likewise with Scout or something, Sniper, of course, long range, etc. But I kind of want to talk about it in a competitive context as well, and sort of highlight the different, you know, meaningful interactions that you see and how range and the different classes' ranged capacities come into play. So yeah, let's just hop into it immediately with Scout. And Scout is certainly a close range class, right? His primary means of dealing damage is the scattergun. Now you do have some, I'll say like long to mid range capabilities with the pistol. It's more of a pestering tool rather than an actual solid damage dealer though. So yeah, in sixes for range damage, Scout is going to be mostly looking to just hit people with pistol shots in order to largely just destroy crit heals more than anything. Although if there's, you know, an escape plan soldier on 20 HP trying to run away, then yeah, of course that's a situation in which you can absolutely be trying to clean that up with the pistol. But by and large, the range capacity of Scout is quite limited. That being said, mid-range, Scout is quite solid. Although you're not going to be hitting those 100 damage meat shots that you would if you're right up in someone's face, still being able to reliably just chunk someone for, you know, 40, 50 damage shots over and over again while avoiding their shots is still quite potent. So when it comes to fighting players as Scout, you kind of have to toe that line and figure out that trade-off between whether you want to just get immediately into their model and just be trying to meat shot them with much easier shots. Keep in mind, easier shots goes both ways as well, because the closer you are to them, generally the easier it is for them to hit you, for most classes at least. Or are you playing a more mid-range, mostly focused on avoiding damage while just slowly but surely chipping them down so that, you know, they can't sustain that fight, right? And there is a bit of both. So by and large though, Scout thrives in close range encounters, and a lot of the time a Scout is looking to get closer to targets while avoiding their shots. And yeah, the scattergun of course has that nice damage ramp up, does a lot of damage close. So now let's just go down the list and talk about Soldier next. And Soldier, curiously, is kind of a multi-range class. So obviously the ranges you would prefer to be fighting people at for Soldier is pretty close, because you don't want to be far enough away that your rockets, you kind of have to predict where your opponents are rather than just being able to shoot where they are and, you know, they can't react or dodge in time because you're too close. That being said, you don't want to get too close necessarily for a lot of engagements, because you do take a lot of self-damage. And oddly enough, the gunboat's explosive self-damage resistance does not apply to self-damage that also hurts someone else. It strictly applies to rocket jumps. So if you were even just trying to rocket jump, for instance, and you happen to clip a player with some type of splash, that your gunboats wouldn't apply to that. You would be taking a lot of damage as a result. So extremely close encounters where you are taking splash from your own rockets is generally something that is not that desirable. You can think, you know, fights with Scouts and whatnot. You might prefer not taking that self-damage because it does rack up. That being said, when a soldier is trying to, for example, bomb a medic or something, that's really not much of a consideration anymore. And for bombs specifically, you are not as concerned with that self-damage because you are trying to just be annihilating the person that you're landing on pretty much. And the easiest way to do so is, of course, you know, hitting your shots. And also keep in mind as well that while, yes, you do take self-damage from your rockets, rockets also have damage ramp up. And, you know, with a base damage of 90, I think it's 90, yeah, it should be 90, your ramp up rockets can go well past that and do, you know, up to and over 100 damage, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, there's a lot of damage to be dealt by being much, much closer to players. But for a lot of kind of 1v1 scenarios, soldiers do try to mitigate that self-damage. That being said, it's not all about that close to mid-range for Soldier. And in fact, Soldier has some pretty solid long-range capabilities because, you know, rockets have damage fall-off, but they also just follow a straight line. And that can be pretty powerful for spam because, you know, you only need you need a thin angle at best in order to spam your rockets across the map. And sure, they're not doing like 100 damage like they would if you were in someone's face. But if you're completely safe, just playing a position and you're able to hit people with, you know, 3 splash rockets. Let's imagine like a mid-fight, right? Soldiers just playing a passive position to stay healthy in case they want to bomb. Just playing the spam. If you hit a medic with, you know, even 2 rockets for like 30 damage each, which, mind you, is not that much damage in the grand scheme of things. Most explosive weapons tend to do more, like namely stickies and, of course, pipes. But if that's on a medic, that's like 60 damage. Often cases more than 60 damage for 2 splash rockets. Which is a big chunk of that medic's health. That medic could now theoretically die to 1 pipe, die to 1 rocket if a soldier landed on them. They are a much softer target to bomb. And that's not even mentioning directs, which do still have damage fall off, but will do 48 damage. And 48 is a lot of damage to do at any range, right? So being able to direct someone across the map and have it deal like 50-ish damage is quite valuable. And being able to like direct someone twice, that's close to 100 damage from like the furthest range possible, right? Because that is the fullest of fall off. It doesn't go any lower, which is not bad at all. Not to mention the fact that against buildings, of course, damage doesn't have fall off. So rockets are going to do the full 90 damage. So it's no surprise that in a lot of last hold breaking strategies, teams will try to double spam the gun with 2 soldiers because those no fall off 90 damage rockets, if fired from 2 soldiers, is going to be way too much for an engineer to out heal. So as long as they're given the space to peek that door and double spam the gun, it will go down swiftly. And that's at any range. Of course, typically the soldiers like to spam the gun from outside the gun's range, but not every hold allows for that. And, you know, the map we're on right now, Snakewater, doesn't allow for that either. But it's a consideration. So Soldier definitely has a mix of ranges that you'd like to play at. You know, just hugging people is, it has its uses because you're going to be dealing an insane amount of damage, but you're probably going to be dying as well. Versus closer to mid-range, close mid-range where you can just deal really high damage rockets that are kind of unreactable from the opponents. And then, of course, you have long-range spam where you're completely safe but still have some pretty formidable damage output, all things considered. And that's pretty much it for Soldier, so let's move on to the next class in the lineup, which is Pyro. And Pyro is where things split pretty substantially between casual and competitive, in my opinion, because in a casual setting, well, first things first, it's obvious that Pyro is, the flamethrower is an extremely short range tool. Extremely short range, right? There is a hard limit on how far the flames can go, and used to be super buggy with like flamethrower mojo, where like your connection to a server would affect how far the flames went. Just crazy stuff. Now I think it's mostly movement based. Maybe some pyro scientists could let me know. But yeah, flamethrower, of course, extremely close range. But in a casual setting, Pyro's still pretty solid as a mid to long range pesterer with a weapon like the flare gun, or especially the detonator and scorch shot, which are just way more consistent at getting afterburn shit. So you can be really good at pestering long range targets as a result. But in sixes, Pyro is extremely short range because you are basically delegated to just your flamethrower and air blast. Now, of course, Pyro, if you're playing, for example, well, let's just talk briefly about, you know, a basic last hold on even Ubers. You're always going to have a sentry gun because you're always going to want that sentry gun. But depending on the hold, your other scout, which isn't really doing too much, might also want to off-class. And what off-class they choose is kind of up to them. In some cases, you're going to want, you know, maybe a sniper out of last, which is just makes it way more difficult for the opponents to pressure doors and whatnot. And other times, you know, sometimes you see a heavy just for a little bit of extra safety and redundancy against the sentry gun or whatnot. But you can see a pyro as well to not only just rack up afterburn chip on like players trying to pressure in lobby or whatnot, but also because you can reflect spam and maybe keep the gun up a little longer. Just make it that much harder to spam down the sentry gun. In a case like this, you absolutely can be kind of pestering people with your detonator or whatnot. However, it's still not really long ranged in any sense because, you know, you're merely like peeking a door into lobby and whatnot. That's pretty much the extent of it. So the range is still quite limited, and Pyro is an extremely short range class as a result. And that's part of the reason as well. Actually, maybe a major reason why Pyro is such a, you know, low use class. At least like doesn't get used full time. Because not only, you know, Pyro has trouble closing the gap and actually taking space, but because of, you know, that extremely limited range, a scout can very easily play just outside the Pyro's range and just basically hard counter them. On top of the fact, you know, a demo can just zone them out with stickies and they just can't really approach meaningfully. Yeah, so range is one of the big downsides to Pyro and one of the main reasons that class kind of struggles. What's next after Pyro? I think that the next one in the list is Demo. So Demo is quite curious. And range is a very particular aspect of Demo because there is a mix of ranges that you're effective at. So for starters, Demo is actually a quite effective long-range class. But there's always just a trade-off associated with Demo's range, which is that closer range, you can deal damage faster, but at long range, it's slower. And this is just because of charging stickies. So Demo is quite long range because a full charge sticky goes very, very far. And if you're expecting someone to leave a certain doorway, like, I mean, we can just use the example on screen right now. We're trying to push through, we're trying to pressure Snakewater Lover. But if we imagine the other team's playing on bats, a full charge sticky would be hitting bats and dealing 50 to 60 damage to those players. It could be more in like the 40 range in some cases, but point being, a lot of damage at an insanely long range and pretty fast too. Like a fully charged sticky travels quickly, but it takes time to charge that, right? But that being said, anywhere from long range all the way to, you know, very, very short range, Demo is effective. It's just a matter of how long it takes to charge in those cases. That being said, you would expect Demo's preferred range to be basically uncharged sticky range, where you can deal your damage the fastest because, of course, you don't have to charge your sticks and everyone's happy. But in reality, usually being just outside of that range and playing a range where you're just barely charging sticks is kind of a happy medium, because you don't necessarily need to just be outputting stickies all the time, and sometimes actually being a little patient and like thinking about where your shots are going does benefit you. But importantly, by playing that range, you are also out of the effective ranges of, you know, most of the classes you're playing against. You're going to have a much easier time dodging rockets from a soldier if you're playing like a charged sticky range. You're going to be taking much less damage from a scout if you're playing that charged sticky range. And if you're playing against a Demo, who, mind you, can also be charging sticks, you can be quite out of range. Just dart into it for just a moment based on how much charge you currently have going, just to get that one sticky off towards them, and then immediately you're out of range. So they would have to commit to like a bigger charge to actually get the damage onto you. But yeah, just barely out of uncharged sticky range is a happy medium, because of course your damage capacity is going to be lower, but your, what's the word I'm looking for? Safety, I guess. The amount of damage you're taking is extremely diminished, and it becomes much easier to dodge spam as a result, and you're generally just much safer in that range, which is a nice happy medium. Now, Demo, of course, and actually, well, we'll talk about that later. Demo, of course, struggles a lot in close range, not just because of the self-damage, same thing that the soldier has. Stickies and pipes, of course, deal damage to you, so if there's a scout in your face, you're going to be taking damage as well. But also, stickies have a time to arm before they can actually fire, so in some cases, if you are close enough, then, you know, say a scout might be able to literally just react to the sticky that you fired and be out of its range by the time it's even armed and be completely safe. So you do have to really watch out about that exceptionally close range. But of course, just out of that range, close-ish, but not super far, is a comfortable range to be at still. One other thing I should mention is one of the major appeals of the lock and load and why you see it being used so much more is because it's able to extend Demo's range a lot in a really meaningful way. Because, of course, pipes don't have damage fall off. They do a full 100 damage anytime they direct hit someone. So that's a lot of damage. Most of the range damage we're talking about is in the ballpark of like 50 damage is good. So having 100 damage, literally double that, at such a long range is a really, really powerful tool, and a lot of demos really enjoy using lock and load because it does kind of extend their range like that. So yeah, that's worth mentioning as well. But Demo is kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to range, except for like the very, very close range, which he struggles a lot in, and is a reason why a lot of scouts, I just missed that dead on bets. It's the reason why, you know, a lot of scouts, one of their main tools against a Demo is to just try and hug him pretty much and then meat shot him. Okay, next we have Heavy. Heavy's pretty straightforward. In a 6-6 context, you pretty much see Heavy either pushing into last or pushing out of last is the main two situations. And Heavy, of course, thrives in close to mid-range. Of course, you deal an insane amount of damage close range and will absolutely shred players. But even at a more mid-range, you still deal a respectable amount of damage. It's not necessarily going to be, you know, the opponents are in imminent danger type of damage, but they are absolutely on a timer for how long they can stay in, because you will slowly but steadily just wear them down. And that's part of the reason why Heavy kind of has the niche he does on a last hold, as that sort of damage sponge, just coordination check. Because if the team can focus down the Heavy, then, you know, they have that pick, the Heavy dies, and they get to, you know, continue with the push. But if they can't deal with that Heavy, then the push has failed pretty much. Like, that Heavy is a check that needs to get cleared. Otherwise, the damage output that the Heavy has is just gonna be too much to deal with. And a lot of the time, when a team tries to collapse and commit on the other side of the last that they ended their Uber on or whatnot, and try to focus down that Heavy during that commit, if they fail to do so, that Heavy is going to be getting kills, absolutely. So yeah, Heavy, definitely a close to mid-range class. Mostly seen on last holds, which do have a wide variety of ranges typically, and that's kind of where Heavy's range thrives. And of course that influences the interactions that Heavy has with other classes, because you really don't want to be close to the Heavy unless your team is trying to run at the Heavy and kill him together. Because if you're just caught close to the Heavy trying to take a 1v1 or whatever, yeah, you should be losing that, and you should be dying. So yeah, next we are going to talk about Engineer. And Engineer, of course, is quite simple. His range is very easily definable as kind of just the bubble of the sentry gun's range, right? Now, of course, Engie is a separate, entity from the sentry gun, but in a competitive context, you really use the engineer for the sentry gun, and you really don't want your engineer engaging in active combat, because your NG dying on last is like horrible, because not only are you down a player, which is really bad, but also your sentry gun becomes so much more spammable, which is really terrible because it just can't get healed off. So even just wayward soldiers peeking a door for one rocket or something at a time will take down that gun in just a few seconds. So generally you aren't engaging in any direct combat, and generally you are more relegated to just having the gun and maintaining that, right? So as a result, your range as an engineer is pretty much your gun's range, but your gun's range is a really important thing because not every last hold the sentry gun can watch every single door. On some it kind of can, like on Snakewater that we're on right now, but an example like Process, just classic example, the gun can't watch everything. You can have a gun, you know, on the right side of the point or something, or on the right side of the last in general, and that's going to lock down the right side, but it's going to be spammable from like 5 or something, or a door on the left. Vice versa, if you build your gun on the left side of point, or the left side of the last in general, then you're going to be able to lock down 5 and lock down all the doors on the left. However, you will not be able to have the gun spot the right side. So where you put the gun is a really important thing to consider, because, you know, that's the ranges at which it can get safely spammed or not without the gun targeting them. So yeah, sentry placement and range and whatnot is a careful consideration for last hold. It's looking like this is probably ending, so we'll pull up another demo. Next, I don't know the order of the... Does it go medic, sniper, spy? I'm pretty sure it does. Okay, let us load up another demo. And man, these non-PREC demos have the... What's it called? They have like the whole pre-game recorded as well, which is a huge nuisance. I may have already used this demo. I have no idea. Right, next we're going to talk about medic. Now, medic is a very polarizing class because you see a variety of ranges. Well, it's either extremely close range, where you can actually melee people, or extremely long range, where you can arrow people. Pretty much. Medic's long range spam is really not that bad. So there's a few disadvantages to spamming arrows. And the principal one, of course, being that you aren't building Uber while doing so. So if a team is playing intelligently and realizing that you, as a medic, are just spamming bows over and over, then what would be an even Uber situation is actually playable ad for them. So that's something you have to be careful about. But yeah, still, those arrows have like reverse fall off, I'm pretty sure, where they actually do a little bit extra damage the further away the further away you are. And bows do a lot of damage. They can like chunk someone for 70 damage, which is a lot actually. So medic's long range capabilities is really not that bad whatsoever. That being said, you know, as a medic, ideally you're not engaging in combat, and ideally you're not forced to engage in combat. But it's not that uncommon to see, you know, a medic getting chased by a scout or something off of a mid-fight where everyone else on the meds team dies. And in some cases, a better medic will be able to hit some bows. And this is usually at a more mid-range kind of thing. I mean, the crossbow is just consistent at getting damage in general because it's just a fast-moving projectile. But, you know, a bow or two with the threat of a melee hit around a corner or something might be enough to discourage that scout and let the med live. So, yeah, as a med, you still have to kind of consider the ranges you want to play at. Kind of bait that melee hit, because if you can, like, be just out of melee range, trying to, like, goad the scout to get closer or something, and then you hit them with the bow while walking forward, and suddenly they're in melee range as you're switching to that, and you kind of combo the two, then yeah, that is actually a threat, and you know that range has to be considered for the medic player. So yeah, medic range is still something to keep in mind, even though you know, not really a direct combo class or combat class. And as well, medigun range is an important consideration. because of course you want to be healing people with your medigun, and you want to be in the proper range for that. So yeah, that's medic. I think next is sniper. Now sniper, of course, is sort of the black sheep of the classes when it comes to range, because sniper excels at longer ranges versus every other class I've talked about. Usually either thrives in close range or thrives in mid-range. The sniper is weak in close and mid-ranges, but excels at long range, which makes sniper engagements really one-sided as a result, because of course, you know, if you are a demo or something, and keep in mind, demo was one of the better long-range classes that we talked about. If you're a demo, then your best bet is like fully charged stickies, just trying to single det on the sniper, which, you know, is more than comfortable enough for them to just tank a couple sticks before backing up or something. Realistically, the way to deal with sniper's range is to close the gap, and soldiers are quite good at that, or, you know, a flanker or whatever. But once you close the gap, sniper becomes more of just a free kill than a threat. Now, of course, you know, there is the actual threat of just a close range quick scope headshot or not, or something like that, which happens on occasion, but more often than not, that sniper is a free kill when you actually close the gap. So when it comes to classes interacting with sniper, it's more so about closing that gap than actually engaging with them at that range at all. And of course, in a sixes context, that tends to be the soldiers are those very mobile classes that are very good at getting on and pressuring those snipers. So yeah, the longer range being better for sniper, and pretty much just the longer the better, is a unique quirk of the class, and it's no different in a competitive context. And finally, we have Spy. Now, Spy, of course, is an extremely close-range class, and Spy does not pose any insta-kill threat when not in melee range, of course, because the only way Spy can backstab people is if he's within melee range. That being said, while of course Spies are trying to get close to their targets and backstab them, the revolver really is no joke, and if you're using stock revolver as well in sixes, which most players either use stock or l'étranger, because of course that extra cloak is really nice for getting into position easier, which also gives you a wider variety of timings to choose from, which, you know, as a result makes your plays more effective generally. Oh look, there's a spy on the screen now, which generally make your timings better and your plays better. That being said, the revolver damage really is no joke, and that is a legitimate threat that makes Spy an actual threat at like close to mid ranges. If you can just beam a medic for 3 revolver shots, in some cases that's enough to kill them, but even if it's not, like, that's a very scary situation for the med, and a lot of the time you will get forces. So yeah, Spy's revolver is definitely not something to be underrated or understated. And it's not strictly a melee range only class in competitive. But yeah, that pretty much covers it for all the classes. They all kind of have their unique ranges, and, you know, while, you know, a class like Scout, for instance, might excel at really close ranges, when it comes to their interactions with, for example, a soldier, they might prefer to play a more mid-range, just chip them down while avoiding their rockets. Or in some cases, you know, if you have a buff or something and you know you can tank a rocket, then you might just try and hug them and then two-shot them before they can two-shot you, because you get to shoot faster. So yeah, range is something that gets taken into account with pretty much every interaction you have with another class or even the same class, and a really important aspect of the balance of the game. But hopefully this was a little bit interesting and kind of recontextualizes the class interactions and the meaningful ranges. There are some differences between casual and competitive, such as, you know, with the case of like Engineer or Pyro, it's a little bit different than you might see in casual, but by and large a lot of the classes are pretty similar, as you would probably expect, because it's kind of, their ranges are largely built into the design of their weapons. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next time.